Could it be that God has called us to do something that fails?
I truly believe that God does not have a specific calling for your life.
There's a very big difference between living by faith and living by your feelings. Could it be that God has called us to do something that fails? Because I had this belief in my mind that if God's called me to do something, it's going to work.
Yeah. And
But that's not always the case, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing is like, that's the idea that we have.
Yeah.
Because since it's all loving, all good, we expect that everything that's going to go along our way is going to be good and smooth sailing.
And by good, we mean is smooth sailing. Good
Yes.
means no problems. Good means that it's easy. Good means that it's successful. Because obviously, a good God wants what I
What is
want,
best for
and what
us.
I want is to be successful and to be, great at everything. But maybe there's a lesson to be learned in the failure.
Sometimes we have a set list, preferences that we think is right for us or that is ideal for us. And that when we hit those checklists, we're basically in God's will, And sometimes we have this idea that I feel good about this person is spiritual, this person is a specific denomination, specific religion. And when we hit those checklists, that's like, yep, this is a clear affirmation from God that this is who I'm going to marry. I'm going to pursue this woman. Like, I'm all set.
Right. And I brought up the story of Hosea, where it was like God quite literally called him to marry someone that didn't meet any of the criteria of his list. And yet he was in the center of God's will.
Sometimes we think that making mistakes is considered a sin, And here's a good example that I can think of. When I moved here in Oregon with my cousin, and we started getting into scented candles. I know it's kind of weird, right?
Like as a business?
Not a business, like
Just as a hobby, or
not a
something
hobby,
that you were
but
buying?
we didn't know that it actually smells good and it's good for the house.
Oh, just a brand new introduction to this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically. And yeah, we were shopping and then we saw the scented candle and then we were so into it that when the moment we got home, we just lighted it up, and because scented candle, it makes the room smell good. But then we thought like, oh, we need to go grocery shopping once again. So we went out and then we left the candle lit.
Okay.
Right. And then when we came back, we saw that candle. Oh, like, shoot, like we forgot to turn off the candle. We could have burned the house down. Now, that is clearly a mistake, but that is not considered a sin.
Okay.
Right. And sometimes we as individuals in our Christian walk, we think that every decision that we make, when we make a mistake, it falls upon us that, oh my goodness, I committed a sin, right?
Yeah, so when it comes to things like college or a spouse or a church to attend or a job to take, we're afraid to make a decision because we feel like once I make that decision, if it's the wrong decision, maybe there's this underlying fear that God will leave me or God will forsake me.
Yes. It's that sense of condemnation or like feeling that God is judging you in a way.
Right.
That I told you so, you didn't follow me, you made that mistake, sucks for you.
The way that I look at God now, because I used to have this view as well, this kind of fear of making any mistake out of fear would be the wrong mistake. Now I look at God less like that, where it's black and white, yes or no, but I look at God a lot more like my GPS. Like if I'm driving to, I don't know, the grocery store, I'm going to go meet up with you for the first time in whatever, and we're in a new part of town, and I put in the GPS coordinates, directions to this coffee shop, but then I make a wrong turn. Guess what happens to the GPS?
It renavigates.
It just
right?
renavigates, and it's honestly not a problem. Why? Because I have a certain position and attitude towards the GPS, in that the GPS knows better than I do.
Yes.
And so when I make a mistake, it will correct me, and I will follow and obey. And that's really how I see God. And that's why what's most important is what's in your heart, not so much did you get everything right along the way. Because if you make a mistake, yeah, you made a mistake. But guess what? God is good, and he wants to get you to that whatever end destination that it is. And as long as you're willing to listen when he says, oh, you should have turned left here, therefore turn right over here, you're like, okay, God, GPS, I trust you.
Yeah, and like there are like the GPS itself, there are multiple ways to get to your destination, right? So and the way I see it, sometimes we isolate ourselves as just one direction. There's only one way to go through this place, but there are other ways to go through this. That's why there's renavigation, right? There are multiple routes to get to your direction.
And we almost have this, and maybe this is because we grew up watching Disney all the time. And there's like the sense like, oh, like at least in relationships, oh, there's this perfect one person for me. And if I make a mistake, then I won't achieve, or I won't meet that one person. And in the same way, where that's calling or that's education, relationships, finances, anything, we have this certain sense that God only has one thing, and if we miss it, then we miss the boat.
Yes, like the ship has sailed. Like there's no turn. Like the ship won't turn back on us. Like,
Right.
Go back, and we can't board it again.
Or even beyond that, like there's not just one ship.
Oh yeah, that is a better analogy. of that
There's
one.
multiple ships in which, like, yeah, there's a certain reality that you missed the first one. God had a plan for you, and maybe because of your rebelliousness or your ignorance or because of whatever, you missed it. But the great news is God is redemptive. God has a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. And the cool thing is that God is somehow talented enough that whenever we make a mistake, God uses it for his glory.
Is that Romans where it says all things work together for good?
Yeah. So like even when you make a mistake, God redeems it and makes it valuable.
The verse doesn't say that all things that happen are bad. It doesn't say that all happenings are good. It doesn't say that all things that happen are based on God's, orchestration. But it says that all things work together.
Yeah.
Even you make a mistake,
The good things work together and the bad things work together.
for good.
Yes.
That is called according to his purpose.
Yeah.
See? And we sometimes isolate that verse into thinking that it is only good.
Yeah.
If it's good, I'm within the purpose of God's calling.
Yeah. So when we realize this, when we realize that, we can be freed up to make a decision, and it could be even the wrong decision, but God is good enough that he'll redeem it. How does that change the way that we are thinking about big life decisions?
I truly believe that God does not have a specific calling for your life, but he gives you multiple options, multiple callings as to what you choose that is tailored to your capacities, your skills, your capabilities, and it is up to you on how are you going to use that to glorify God.
Interesting. So this is something that I think people believe inherently, but have a challenge with the language of. There's not a specific path that God has for you. If that's not the case, then what's the alternative? What is the thing that God cares about?
Oh, God cares more about who you become on the process of the path you're taking.
Explain that to me.
Okay, like what we said, there are multiple areas on how you can approach things. You can be a nurse, you can be a graphic designer, you can be a videographer, photographer, a vlogger. So either of those things, whichever you choose, God doesn't really care. But what he cares about is who you become on the decision process that you take. If I choose to be a nurse, do I become a better person, or do I become in the likeness of God when I choose nursing? Do I become in the likeness of God when I chose to do graphic design? He cares more about the principles on how you approach those areas.
Why do you think that's what he cares about more than the specific thing?
Because God cares more about your freedom, because God is a God of love, and love requires freedom. And freedom involves risks, and risks having, commit mistakes, you learn from it. And that is the entirety of who God is. He wants us to freely choose to love him and to serve him. And that's what makes love love.
I really like that a lot because it changes my perception of where I experience God to just only in one thing to being in everything. Here's what I mean. If God has called me to be a nurse, then perhaps the only way I might believe that I can experience God is as a nurse or at church, because that's the obvious one, right? But anything outside of that is almost like that's extracurricular activities. That's just something that you choose to do, but like God's not really there. But if God has multiple paths, he has multiple different directions that you could take, and what he's really actually concerned about is who you become in the process. Well, who you are is who you are, and what you do is all a part of who you become. Whether that's your hobbies, the people that you hang out with, your education, etc., like all of those things. And if that's the case, then I can experience God in all of them. This episode was brought to you ad-free by a small group of people known as patrons. If you enjoyed this video and have found value in the channel and you want to support our mission, you can do so over at patreon.com/thatchristianvlogger for as little as the cost of 1 cup of coffee per month.